Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakah Kadash, Barakatah. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone that rule well, and peace and salutations to Yakim out there pushing this word and truth. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and the name of the article I'll be using today is Shadow Armies, the Unseen But Real U.S. War in Africa, and this is on antiwar.com. There's a real but largely concealed war which is taking place throughout the African continent. It involves the United States, an invigorated Russia, and a rising China. The outcome of the war is likely to define the future of the continent and its global outlook. And Africa's going to be a pretty big player in this coming century, as stated in this article on African Business, Why Africa Will Rule the 21st Century. And I'm going to jump around a little bit, but this paragraph I'm going to be using is, at the heart of the argument presented by the book is the observation that all societies move through various stages of development to arrive at what we now consider advanced stages. The theory is that Africa will now arrive at the same level of economic, social, and political development as China, Korea, and India 20 to 30 years ago, and that given the geo-economic structure of the world is poised to grow along the same type of trajectory as the Asian tigers, but perhaps at a faster pace due to its advantages in possessing vast natural resources, huge tracts of cultivatable land, and a population structure in which productive youth will outnumber the elderly or the very young. In this paragraph it says, "What is more," says Robertson, "the most remarkable progress will occur in the next 2 generations. We expect the billion Africans who in the past decade have already experienced the fastest growth the continent has ever seen to become the fastest 2 billion, and Africa's GDP to increase from 2 trillion today to 29 trillion in today's money by 2050. By that date, the argument goes, Africa will produce more GDP than the US and Eurozone combined do today." And you'd be crazy to think that any countries like the West or the US or Russia and China would just let Africa come up and be a new geopolitical competitor on an economic scale in the world to rival them. It is easy to pin the blame on US President Donald Trump, his erratic agenda, and impulsive statements. But the truth is, the current U.S. military expansion in Africa is just another step in the wrong direction. It is part of a strategy that has been implemented a decade ago during the administration of President George W. Bush and actively pursued by President Barack Obama. In 2007, under the pretext of the war on terror, or the war on resources, the U.S. consolidated its various military operations in Africa to establish the United States Africa Command. Slacky Brothers. With a starting budget of $500 million, AFRICOM was supposedly launched to engage with African countries in terms of diplomacy and aid, but over the course of the last 10 years, AFRICOM has been transformed into a central command for military incursions and interventions. So as you can see, as it'll say on in this article, these outside powers are already starting to put their hooks into this country, so they'll be able to influence the resource management so it'll benefit them in the future. However, that violent role has rapidly worsened during the first year of Trump's term in office. Indeed, there is a hidden U.S. war in Africa, and it is fought in the name of counterterrorism. According to a Vice News special investigation, U.S. troops are now conducting 3,500 exercises and military engagements throughout Africa per year, an average of 10 per day. U.S. mainstream media rarely discusses this ongoing war, thus giving the military ample space to destabilize any of the continent's 54 countries as it pleases, which they did in Libya and Syria and countries during the Arab Spring. So they're just doing their same old MO over and over again, not learning the benefits or not learning the consequences from these actions. Today's figure of 3,500 marks an astounding 1,900% increase since the command was activated less than a decade ago, and suggests a major expansion of U.S. military activities on the African continent, Vice reported. Following the death of 4 U.S. Special Forces soldiers in Niger on October 4th, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis made an ominous declaration to a Senate committee. These numbers are likely to increase as the U.S. is expanding its military activities in Africa. Mattis, like other defense officials in the previous 2 administrations, justifies the U.S. military transgressions as part of an ongoing counterterrorism efforts. But such coded references has served as a pretense for the U.S. to intervene in and exploit a massive region with great economic potential. And if any of you brothers know or don't know about the Panama Canal, I definitely recommend going up and looking up into it. And this is on Wikipedia. I'm going to read a little bit about the Panama Canal, which sounds very similar to what the U.S. and Russia and China to an extent are attempting to do in Africa. And this is under the tab U.S. State Acquisition. On January 22, 1903, the Hay-Haran Treaty was signed by the United States Secretary of State John M. Hay and Colombian Charge Dr. Tomas Haran. For $10 million and an annual payment, it would have granted the United States a renewable lease in perpetuity from Colombia on the land proposed for the canal. And the Panama Canal was, back in those days, in order to get to the Pacific or the Pacific side of the world, to get resources over there, countries on the north would have to go down past the tip of South America and go over it to get to other areas of the land, and vice versa from countries trying to get to the North Atlantic side. But the Panama Canal cut straight through and was an easy trade route to move resources, and that's what they're trying to do with Africa now by setting up AFRICOM, supposedly for diplomacy and aid, but it's just to easily exploit those resources so they can get them back to their people and whoever the prospective buyers in the world is. I lost my place a little bit. Let me find it. All right. The treaty was ratified by the U.S. Senate on March 14th, 1903, but the Senate of Colombia did not ratify it. Buenaventura told President Theodore Roosevelt and Hay of a possible revolt by Panamanian rebels who aimed to separate from Colombia, and hoped that the United States would support the rebels with U.S. troops and money. Sounds similar to Syrian rebels trying to revolt against Bashar al-Assad, and the whole reason for that Syrian civil war was that Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. wanted to build a pipeline through Syria to Europe, but Syria was allied with Russia and I believe Turkey and Iran, who wanted to build their own pipeline, so you can see the conflicting interests that were going on there. And let me see. Sorry if I'm rereading some sentences. I keep losing my place to go into my explanations. Buenaventura told President Theodore Roosevelt and Hay of a possible revolt by Panamanian rebels who aimed to separate from Colombia, and hoped that the United States would support the rebels with U.S. troops and money. Roosevelt changed tactics based in part on the Mallarino-Bidlack Treaty of 1846 and actively supported the separation of Panama from Colombia, and shortly after recognizing Panama, signed a treaty with the new Panamanian government under similar terms to the Hay-Haran Treaty. On November 2, 1903, U.S. warships blocked sea lanes for possible Colombian troop movements en route to put down the rebellion. Panama declared independence on November 3, 1903. The United States quickly recognized the new nation. On November 6, 1903, Felipe Buenaventura, as Panama's ambassador to the United States, signed the Hay-Buenaventura Treaty, granting rights to the United States to build and indefinitely administer the Panama Canal Zone for its resources, as it wants to do with Africa and its resources and its defenses, AFRICOM, for instance. This is sometimes misinterpreted as the 99-year lease because of misleading wording included in the Article 22nd of the agreement. Almost immediately, the treaty was condemned by many Panamanians as an infringement on their country's new national sovereignty. This would later become a contentious diplomatic issue among Colombia, Panama, and the United States. And these countries, such as Russia, the US, and China, you're going to see similar African countries starting to go against these major powers because they'll see that they're going to begin playing them against each other for their own economic benefit. Back to the article. The old colonial scramble for Africa is being reinvented by global powers, that fully fathom the extent of the untapped economic largesse of the continent. While China, India, and Russia are each developing a unique approach to wooing Africa, the U.S. is invested mostly in the military option, gunboat diplomacy, which promises to inflict untold harm and destabilize many nations. The 2012 coup in Mali, carried out by U.S.-trained Army Captain Amadou Hayoud Sanoga, is only one example, like those Panamanian rebels that were funded by Theodore Roosevelt to fight against Colombian troops. In a 2013 speech, then U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton cautioned against a new colonialism in Africa in which it is easy to come in, take out natural resources, pay off leaders, and leave. While Clinton is, of course, correct, she was disingenuously referring to China, not her own country. China's increasing influence in Africa is obvious, and Beijing's practices can be unfair. However, China's policy towards Africa is far more civil and trade-focused than the military-centered U.S. approach, which is only the case right now because China wants to show it has a different face from the U.S. and not be as tyrannical seeming. But I'm going to get a scripture in 2 Esdras 15:46 through 51. And thou, Asia, China, Moab, Ammon, and such, that are partakers of the hope of Babylon, and are the glory of her person, woe be unto thee, thou wretch, because thou hast made thyself like unto her, and hast decked thy daughters in whoredom, that they might please and glory in thy lovers, which have always desired to commit whoredom with thee. Thou hast followed her that is hated in all her works and inventions. Therefore saith the Most High, I will send plagues upon thee, widowhood, poverty, famine, sword, and pestilence, to waste thy houses with destruction and death. And the glory of power shall be dried up as a flower, the heat shall rise that is sent over thee. Thou shalt be weakened as a poor woman with stripes, and as one chastised with wounds, so that the mighty and lovers shall not be able to receive thee. So as you can see, if China was in the same position as the U.S. right now, they would be using the military option, but since they're not, they're being more subtle like the servant in their means of acquiring influence in Africa, but they're going to receive the same fate, but not as bad as America for following America's ways. The growth in China-Africa trade figures is, as per a UN news report in 2013, happening at a truly breathtaking pace, as they jump from around 10.5 billion per year in 2000 to 166 billion in 2011. Since then, it has continued at the same impressive pace. But that growth was coupled with many initiatives entailing many billions of dollars in Chinese credit to African countries to develop badly needed infrastructure. More went to finance the African Talents Program, which is designed to train 30,000 African professionals in various sectors. It should come as no surprise then that China surpassed the U.S. as Africa's largest trading partner in 2009. The real colonialism, which Clinton referred to in her speech, is, however, underway in the U.S.'s own perception and behavior towards Africa. This is not hyperbole, but in fact a statement that echoes the words of U.S. President Trump himself. During a lunch with 9 African leaders last September at the UN, Trump spoke with the kind of mindset that inspired Western leaders' colonial approach to Africa for centuries. Soon after he invented the non-existent country of Namibia, I think that might be in the Black Panther movie, Trump posted of his many friends who are going to your African countries trying to get rich. I congratulate you, he said. They're spending a lot of money. I'm going to get another scripture in Habakkuk 2 and 5